On this episode of Talk About Games, we're talking about the Commodore 64 Mini. We both got these on Amazon.
We did.
I want to mention before we start that the version of the Commodore 64 Mini we have is the International Edition. This isn't the pre-release American one that's coming out in October. On the back it says the model number is RGL001 on this shiny label right here. And that's the one that we're reviewing today. It came in this box right here.
There is talk that they might release like a full-size one, but yeah. So this Talk About Games is about the C64 Mini original. First of all, you're gonna want to know this keyboard. It doesn't work. It's not a real keyboard. And with the C64, a lot of the games you need a keyboard. Just so you want to know how this thing works, you connect this to your television via HDMI, and then there's USB sticks. The controller, you can stick it in with USB. Like I said, the problem is, you can't use the keyboard, and a lot of the games need it. So what you can do is, with the controller, you can bring up the keyboard in on the screen, but it's really, really terrible because you have to go down manually and select the letters. So forget that. That stinks. The thing that you can do is you can plug in a real keyboard. However, you go to plug in the real keyboard. I plugged in two different types of keyboards. One keyboard didn't work, and then I plugged in another type of keyboard, and it did work, except I had to reboot the console to get it to work, because at first I plugged it in and I'm like, oh, it doesn't work. Let me try rebooting, and then it worked. Mm-hmm. So
the Commodore it came out in 1982. It was a home computer system. You could think of it as a competitor to the early IBM XT PC or the Apple IIs and the early Macintoshes, that kind of thing. But it was a home computer that anyone could use. I think a lot of people probably used it as a terminal to log into their work, networks, that kind of thing. And it had a lot of games. It was a game system as well as a personal computer.
I had one as a kid. Actually, it was my sister's. And it was bought to do homework with, but all we did was play games with it. The one thing I remember doing that was really funny with the Commodore 64 is it had a printer, and for Christmas time, we'd print out a banner that said Merry Christmas, and with a Christmas tree on it. But you'd start doing it, and it would be and 15 minutes, not even 25 minutes later, it would print out the banner. And I remember, I specifically remember going and eating dinner and coming back, and the thing was still going.
The first time I ever wrote any code on any computer ever in my life was on a Commodore 64 in Commodore Basic, which was kind of cool. It definitely was a tool to teach people how to program and to teach people about how software works and all of those things. So I thought that was a lot of fun. I didn't really do much. I just got numbers to go on the screen and things. I was very, very young.
Right.
I barely remember it. But we had 3 in our house. We had 2 Commodore 64s. Because one of them broke and was later repaired. And then we had the previous model, which is called the Commodore VIC-20.
Yes, which is in one of the nerd videos. I think he reviews Dracula on it.
Yeah, so we had that, which is even worse. It's called the Commodore 64, I believe, because it has 64K of RAM. That's what I'm guessing, right? Which is not a lot of RAM.
Yeah.
The thumbnail image for this video probably many times the total RAM capacity of this system.
That's really funny.
Which is funny. But you could tell that the developers of this, going back to the keyboard issue, did know that you were going to want to connect peripherals like keyboards because there are 2 USB ports.
So you can do that. So when I first started playing the games for this, I was using this, and I was getting very frustrated. I was getting very frustrated because that I'm a huge Atari 2600 fan too. Whenever I play Atari 2600, I use a Sega Genesis controller. With this, I don't like using the Atari controller because after it's fine for a minute, but after 5 minutes, your hand starts to hurt. Same thing with this. I start playing this, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to go through 64 games using this. I'm not gonna be able to play all 64 of them like that. So I was just off of a whim, I'm like, I wonder if I plug in a USB Super Nintendo controller into this, if it would work. And surprisingly, it worked. So if you guys happen to get this, use a USB Super Nintendo controller because there's nothing better than playing games with a D-pad.
When you did the Super Nintendo controller, did you have use of like the menu button or any of these guys?
Yes,
down here?
it was a little weird because when I would try to exit a game, I'd have to use L.
Yeah.
On the thing, it was a little weird, but it was so much better because I could use like X and Y to fire. There was a game, I forget the name of it off the top of my head, but if you're trying to play it on here, it was an overhead. In fact, I could probably figure out the name of it, like Alley Cat or one of the A ones. It was right in the beginning. I can't remember. Anyway, so you're a ship and you're flying. It's a horizontal above view game, and you're flying the ship, and with the left button and you hit down, the ship can flip. Mm-hmm. And with the right button, you can fire. But you have to move left and right with the stick. So you're going left and right, and then you can flip the ship, but then how do you fire at the same time? You have to go like this.
Right, because you can't, there's no physical, like, you're not going to hold it like this.
If you held it like that, then you'd be going the wrong...
You'd be going, you'd lose your mind, because up would be right, and yeah.
So that game, but then I realized that game must have been a keyboard game.
Right.
But it's like, then you have to do it with keyboards, and I was like, thank God I was able to do it with the Super Nintendo controller. Then I played it, and unfortunately the game still wasn't very good, but you probably are wondering about the games. There are some good games on there, but I do have to say a lot of the games were not too great.
So the big thing about the C64 Mini is it was kickstarted. There's a group called Retro Games. They're a small group of people that are making this happen. And you could tell that this isn't on the same level, even as like the Genesis minis that we have. Mm-hmm. They're from a little bigger company, let alone like the NES Mini or the Super Nintendo Mini, which are obviously from Nintendo. You know, none of the LucasArts games are on here. You're not going to be playing Maniac Mansion, you know?
The first thing, I think you told me about this thing. I didn't even know about it. And I guess that's because it's overseas. But the first thing I thought when you told me about that, I'm like, oh, that's cool. I'll be able to play like the Thundercats game.
Right.
And the He-Man game.
Yeah.
And there's none of that licensed kind of stuff on there. And there's all those kind of games. There's like a Psycho game. There's a Friday the 13th. There's a Freddy Krueger game. I'm like, oh, I can play all that stuff. And some of you guys, I know what a lot of you guys are thinking. I'm just going to say it. Of course, you know, apparently you can put...
there's a USB port on
There's a USB port, and you can do that, but apparently you can only do one at a time if you were to try that, and that is annoying. I don't know if that'll be changed later, but...
So, you can sideload on this. Anybody who's technically competent is going to be able to play the Commodore ROMs on this system. It was a little bit too much of a pain for us. It's not something it's not worth it for me to play, and I guess this is my criticism of Commodore in general. I feel like all of the meaningful titles on this system, with few exceptions, and I'm sure there are a few exceptions, have come out on other consoles later. If you even look at the game list that they have for the C64 itself, stuff like Winter Games and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's on there. Yeah.
They're NES games.
Yeah,
so right.
You could just play them on NES.
So, and then, you know, a lot of the big titles, like I was talking about the LucasArts games, a lot of those LucasArts games, I could play them on an IBM PC, I could play them in DOSBox, I could play them here, there, everywhere. I mean, I think that the Commodore 64 Mini is like this great novelty to like show people, like, hey, look, I remember the Commodore, here it is.
Well, I do have to say, I think that this, if it was better and had a better selection of games, is more worth it to me than like the NES Classic, because first of all, with the NES Classic and the Super Nintendo Classic, you could have downloaded a lot of those games like on the Wii U and the Virtual Console and all that stuff. Those games are around. And also, if you get the original carts, they're a lot easier to play. You pop them in, whatever. Commodore 64 games a lot of times are, you know, hard to load, hard to find.
And this solves a lot of those problems.
This solves a lot of those problems if it was really good. But going back to the games, like you were just saying, the LucasArts games and all that stuff, you know, when I had the Commodore 64 back in the day, I had just games like, you know, Miss Pac-Man and Dig Dug and that kind of stuff, and there's none of that on there.
I just think called the game that I remember from the Commodore 64, because like when I had as a kid, it was more like a programming, word processing, like that's what my parents did with it.
It was like a typing tutor or something?
Like that's kind of what they wanted me to do with it, and then they're like, and then we had the Coleco, which was the gaming system at the time.
Right.
We had this thing called Facemaker, where you like, imagine if you had a game where it's just like the character creator.
Yeah.
But that's the whole game. There's not like, again, like you make faces, like you pick different eyes, different noses, mouths, like shapes, that kind of thing.
Like, where's that game?
Yeah, where's Facemaker?
Yeah.
Come on.
Okay, and I had a game that was called Lazy Jones.
Yeah.
Lazy Jones was basically a game where you're going around like this office building, and you go into a room, and there's basically mini games.
Right.
You go into the room, and I remember one of the games was like there's a turkey and there's a fork, and you got to get the fork into the turkey or whatever. Stupid games like that, but they were almost like little mini Atari games. But you got it was like an Action 52 of a type of game. But the games were actually kind of fun, a lot of them. One of the funny things about the game, though, and it was so early on that you never saw anything like this in the game, because it was in an office building, he goes into the bathroom and he actually pees in the toilet, and you don't see anything, but it makes a funny like peeing sound, and then he like exits. There's funny, quirky games like that I'm like, where are these games?
That kind of thing wouldn't get the Nintendo seal of quality.
Well, there was shitting in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
From the birds, but not human.
But
can you think of any NES game? This is like putting us on the spot, and I'm sure that you guys are going to tell us about all of them. But can you think of any NES or Super Nintendo game where there are either human feces or urine anywhere in them?
All I can think of right now is the one game that says fuck, like that Pat and Kun game, but I can't think of any with shit or feces.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's something to think about, everybody.
Yeah. When you're playing Commodore 64 more than playing the games, I feel like half of it is the aesthetics of it. And many Commodore fans, you guys know if you have a Commodore or played it, you played it on that old Commodore monitor.
Yeah.
And the Commodore 64 games, like a lot of the games had a very unique look. It's not like playing NES games on a CRT. It had this very unique look to it. And I remember playing those games, BC's Quest for Tires and Miss Pac-Man and whatever, all these different games, and it having like this very specific Commodore look to it. And on the flat screen televisions, yes, they do include like scan lines and stuff like that, but it's not the same at all. And so here's what I tried to do. So I got out, because I'm a crazy person, I got out my original C64 monitor and a little device that you gave me.
Yeah.
You know that little white thing?
Yeah.
So I plugged in the Commodore 64 monitor from the composite into the little adapter, and it's a composite to HDMI adapter. Then I had the HDMI cable going into the back of this, and I tried to get the games to come up on the monitor. And what you
need? The device that I gave you.
Yeah.
Only goes from AV to HDMI.
It doesn't go the other way.
But if you go on Amazon right now, you can get one where it goes the other way around.
Okay.
And if you had gotten that, it would have worked.
Well, I'm gonna get that.
So because that would be the most authentic experience. You know, CRT technology, even among like why do people like your Sony, like your Trinitron monitors, like a PVM?
I have a PVM and a BVM.
Yeah. So people like the PVM because of the way that the phosphors look, the shape of it, how what a commitment to like quality, to how nice and clear they are. Mm-hmm. Among different manufacturers of CRTs, they use different mask technology and different ways to set up the three colors, you know, the phosphors. That Commodore monitor was built a certain way. Mm-hmm. You know, the way that they masked the electron gun and everything, the space between them, how big the scan lines are, all of that stuff. That's really hard to replicate because it's like a physical, you know, thing. And
it's almost like the Vectrex, where it's like you can't like replicate it.
Yeah, like if you throw a Vectrex game on a LCD monitor, it's not the same because it's like burning at you.
And that's what I'm trying to say. It's just you know, even if I'm playing some of these games, even some of the better ones that I played, it's like I'm still not getting that Commodore like feeling. It's like you know, playing Sega Genesis. There's that feeling that you get with the music and the way the sounds are, and I was missing that from not playing the games on the monitor.
Yeah. I think I will get you one of those things, and you have to report back as to if it recaptures.
What I'd really like from you is I have an original C64 and I've been trying to get that running for the longest time. And Ryan's a computer guy. Maybe he can help me out someday.
Oh yeah.
But Ryan's like, I'm dying to do that.
Yeah, that's great.
So what I do want to do is go through a couple of things. I actually took some notes as I was doing this, and I do want to go through.
So you're gonna go through all the games
because I can't remember I didn't do every game, but I wrote notes for.
I just want to mention, guys, this list is alphabetized. Get ready.
Yeah, so
I'm just looking at it.
Yeah, so I don't have stuff to say about all the games, but there was a game called, let's see, Anarchy. You were just shooting with a tank. It was very basic. It was fine. There was a game called Armalite, which is a horizontal shooter. With that, it's like very hard to go back to a game like that because after you play like R-Type and Proteus and like games that came later, Darius and all this stuff, going back to a shooter back on Commodore, you're kind of like, this is a drag.
Yeah.
You know.
By the way, the word Armalite. Do you know the rifle in AR-15?
Okay, yeah.
So the AR-15, the rifle that like U.S. military and other militaries use, it was the Colt Armalite 15.
Okay.
And that's where that Armalite comes from.
Yeah.
But now, like a million different companies make them, but that's why it's called an AR-15 because of the original, and that's where like Armalite comes from.
Oh, that's where that word comes from?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have the game Avenger. Avenger was like a ninja game. This game I actually kind of liked. It's just a ninja going around, but it's overhead perspective, and you're going around collecting treasure. You're throwing, stars at people, and it was a basic game, but it was fun. If I owned it back when I was a kid, I would have liked it. So that was a pretty good game. There was a game called Boulder Dash. Boulder Dash was probably my favorite game on the entire thing. It was similar to like Dig Dug or Mr. Do, that kind of thing. You're like a little mole or gopher or something like that, going around digging through dirt. And you're just like collecting gems and items. It was very basic, but it functioned really well and it was fun. California games, of course, but like Ryan made a good point earlier, it's like on NES, you can just play it on there. There was a game called Chips Challenge. This game might have been good. The puzzle part of it might have been good, but I had to shut it off really quickly because the music was so grating to my ears. It just it had to go.
Wow.
There was a game called Cyberdyne Warrior. Yes, and I'm gonna forgo the Terminator jokes.
Yeah.
But it was basically I turned it on at first, and it was just like this warrior guy going around with a gun. I'm like, okay, like side scroller warrior, but like there's no music to the game, and the controls were like not that great. Oh, and he has a gun, and you can switch between different guns, but the gun runs out of ammo.
Oh, I hate side-scrolling games with ammo, except for G.I. Joe.
That's a good game.
It's a good game.
Yeah.
And it has ammo.
Yeah, so skipping down a bit, I didn't play everything. So there's a game called A Fire Lord, and it's just a dude where you walk around the forest, and there's just a lot of fart sound effects, and you collect bread. That's my review of that game. It was
awesome.
Really stupid. It was not good. It was this game called Gribbly's Day Out, where it's just this really bizarre green alien jumping around, like going gribbly grobbly, and he's collecting his like little children, which are like mushrooms or something. I didn't even understand it, and the controls were awkward. I'm sorry, I said the wrong thing. The game with the ammo was actually Hawkeye. Sorry, I'm getting the C64 games confused. So the one we were just talking about with the ammo, that was Hawkeye. Sorry. Like I said, I didn't play every one of the games. A couple of the games I couldn't even get to work past the menu screen.
Wow.
This game called Jumpman, I was probably doing something wrong. One of the main ones that I want to talk about was this game called Paradroid, which was really, really interesting. And I don't need the notes for this because I remember it. So this game, there's basically little spheres. And you start with a sphere with a number 1 on it, and you move around. You're moving around a spaceship, and you move around, and then you find another little sphere, and the other sphere might have a different number on it, like it might have 200, and then there'll be another sphere that comes along that might say 300. So you want to bring your little guy over to the lower number, and when you combine them, you possess the other sphere, which takes you to a mini game. And if you win the mini game, then you become that number. So if you're starting at number 1 and you beat the number 100 guy, now you're number 100.
Okay.
The mini game I thought was pretty bad. Like it's this weird game where you're moving like lines around and stuff. It was not the best mini game, but I often get asked the question, if any old game could be remade, like what would you say? I think that this would be a good one for an indie developer to remake because it's a really interesting concept. And by the way, the spaceship you're on, it's like the Starship Enterprise. And I think the guys who made the game must have been Star Trek fans.
Right.
At that point, it must have been the original series.
Right.
But there's basically turbo lifts, and you go from deck to deck to deck to deck. And as you go through the decks, I think the numbers get higher for the guys that you fight do the mini game with. This would be really interesting if somebody remade it and made the mini game better, or made different mini games, because this is the same mini game over and over and over. But if you went to it and it was like made it more like Mario Party or something where the mini games are all different, it's actually a really interesting concept. And I think if I had that game when I was a kid, I didn't have that game, I probably would have really liked that game a lot. And it took me a few minutes to like kind of understand the concept of the game, but that was actually really a cool concept, especially for back then in the C64 era. So I'd recommend trying that one out. And I'm just going to try to finish out this list real quick. There was another game from an overhead perspective where you're a ball and you're basically, it's a ball bouncing, but you go upwards, like sort of like a vertical shooter type of thing, and you're bouncing from platform to platform, but almost like Monkey Ball, where you can fall off the platform and drop to your death. You bounce from platform to platform, and there's like arrows and things that'll send you shooting out further and stuff like that. And it was interesting because of the perspective and how they did it. When the ball was basically when the ball's smaller on the screen, it's like that's when it's hitting the ground, and when the ball's bigger, that's when it's in the air. It was sort of an interesting perspective. But that game controlled well, at least with the SNES controller. It controlled well. I wouldn't want to play any of these games with this thing. Then there was one more game I want to talk about, which I could not fucking stand, and it was called Synapse. And this game was it was a hard horizontal shooter.
Can you tell me what is a Synapse?
I actually wrote that down.
Oh, did you?
I was like, what the fuck is a Synapse? So you slam into walls, first of all, like Silver Surfer. The game's a horizontal shooter. I had been playing a lot of R-Type recently, and R-Type, they made it so that like the hitbox of the walls, like it's kind of harder to hit the walls in R-Type, because a lot of the walls in R-Type, you can like blow away the walls and stuff like that so that you can like get through them and all that. That's a well-made game. This fucking game, it's so easy to hit the ground and to hit the ceiling. And then, so in Gradius, when you're playing the game and you get the little items, and then you can, or Life Force, and you select through the things, and you can get, the missiles.
You pick when you're gonna fire it, when you're gonna get it.
Yeah. So in this game, you shoot the enemies, and a little thing, starts floating around, which you grab, which that is like Gradius or Life Force, but certain, like, they count as fuel first, and you have to fill up your fuel before you can use the weapons. And then once you fill your fuel up, then you have to hold the button down and then grab the next one for it to change to the next item. And it's this really fucking awkward system, and I was getting so frustrated playing it, and I just felt like, oh my god, I just want to play like Gradius.
And while you're doing that, you're trying to dodge stuff, and you're like, oh, now I gotta do the... It's like...
And if I was I was doing it with the Super Nintendo controller. If I was doing it with this, I would have fucking... This is like a butt plug, by the way. Like, I would have wanted to shove this like up my ass or something. Like, I would have wanted to just kill myself, beat myself over the head with this fucking thing. Good. Because the other thing was with the, even I'm gonna say, even back when we were kids, I didn't like using these. I never liked using these.
Yeah,
kind of
like the NES Advantage or whatever.
I didn't like that either. Back then you could plug in, I believe, like Atari controllers and Genesis controllers. I would have used, even back then, I would have used a different controller.
Yeah.
So, anyway, I went through more games for a while, but, there's good games, there's bad games. So, basically, do you have anything else to say about it?
I mean, there was two things that we really need to say is, it comes with a micro USB cable. It doesn't come with the little power brick. So unless you have a USB device to plug into, you can't even use this thing out of the box. I think that despite the flaws we talked about, it's a fairly pure Commodore 64 experience, minus plugging in the tape decks and the floppy drives and the printers and things like that.
Actually, you know what? Now we're talking about this. You're talking about the power cord. So I have to mention one more thing. So when I first tried to get this thing installed, or tried to get it working, and forget about the thing I was trying to do with the C64 monitor. That was just like a special thing. Just as far as getting this thing to work normally, I had to plug this into 3 different regular flat screen monitors even before it would start working. So I think there's some kind of problem with this. And again, this is like the original version. They might get it fixed by the time it comes out. But I had to plug this into several different monitors before it would even work. And only one of my monitors did it work on.
The other thing I wanted to say is I think this was a very ambitious project for a small team to kickstart. I wouldn't have the balls to kickstart something this complicated with this many things that need to be QA'd and done and everything. I mean, I think that despite the flaws of it, they did a good job. I think that this is like a pretty attractive, you know, and reasonable package.
I'm not at all trying to crap on this thing. Yeah. There are good games on this. I did get it working ultimately. I think that this is a fantastic idea. I think it's a better idea than the NES Mini or the SNES Mini. I just hope that when it comes out in the United States, when it comes, in October, I hope that they fix a couple of these issues. And even if those issues aren't fixed, even if this is the same product that comes out, I hope that there's some kind of firmware update to where they can hopefully patch it as it goes on. Because it does have a couple problems, but an awesome idea, and I'm all for it.
I think at $80, I guess the issue that I do think is a problem, at $80, you better be willing to take a deep dive into the Commodore 64 and do the side loading and get the keyboard to work and do all of the things, because this is one expensive console. I mean, you could buy used like a DS or something.
That said, I will say know? if they later update it to where you can add more of the games into the USB slot, you're talking the Commodore 64 has like 5,000 games.
Yeah.
If you could get 5,000 games loaded on this, it would be worth, I think, way more than $80. So if somebody figures out that USB slot thing, this thing will be amazing.
I just want to mention that Nintendo recently sued 2 major ROM sites, Cool ROMs, and I forget the other one. And now those sites have no ROMs on them. So I think we're kind of...
Those are for like NES ROMs, though. We're talking about like...
No, I know,
Commodore.
But I think we may be coming into a situation where, the rights holders may start cracking down and following Nintendo's lead. So it may be the best time ever to get the data, get the data for these. I'm not a ROM guy.
I'm not either. I play games on cards.
I have I have rooms full of games. But for something like this, to experience history, I think it's a really good way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, I do want to, since we're talking about ROMs and stuff. By the way, I have no problems with emulators and stuff like that. Yeah. I don't prefer to use them because I'm a collector. Like I like to own the boxes as well. Like it's just, for me, it's part of the experience. It's also like what I was saying earlier about the monitor. Like it's a lot of the things are about having the physical things. So for me that's part of the experience. I'm all for this. It is a little pricey.
Yeah.
But hopefully if you can get all those games loaded on it, it's probably worth it. And I'm excited for the American release. And if the American release is different than this one, I probably will buy it.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah. When they were kickstarting it, they mentioned a full-sized version with
I would buy
working keyboard and everything.
That'd be awesome.
If that full size, I think the last article I saw about the full-size version was like early last year, like in 2017. But if that's coming, when that's coming, that'll be a cool package. Because that'll actually feel like the system did when it was new. Because remember that the system is in the keyboard. On the real Commodore, it is just the keyboard. There's no tower or anything sitting next to it. So that'll be cool too.